Have you ever sat in a quiet room and suddenly realized that silence doesn't scare you anymore? That you don't need to turn on the television, check your phone, or find someone to talk to? You're just there sitting, breathing, and somehow it feels peaceful. Not because life has become perfect, but because something inside you has shifted. Maybe you've noticed this too. The people who used to upset you no longer trigger a reaction. The situations that once wounded you now pass through like a breeze. You're not caught in the same old stories, no more blaming, no more needing to prove anything. You simply observe and smile. That's not indifference. That's freedom. And then one day, you look back at the pain you once carried, and there's no bitterness. Instead, there's gratitude for the ones who left, for the moments you broke down. Because somehow those were the very things that taught you how to stand back up. They gave you the kind of wisdom no one else could give, the wisdom of awakening. Many people think clearing karma is some big mystical experience. But really, it's quiet. There's no flashing light, no applause. It's just one day you feel lighter. Things begin to flow into your life without grasping. And the things that used to cling to you no longer find a home. In today's video, we'll explore 8 subtle but powerful signs that your karma is being cleared. These signs don't come with loud bells or grand spiritual speeches. They show up in your daily life, in the way you breathe, in how you respond, in how you love, and in how you no longer need to fight to be seen. If you felt any of this, or even wondered where you are on your healing path, then maybe, just maybe, you're standing right at the doorway of freedom. Let's walk through these 8 signs together one by one and listen deeply to see how far your heart has come. 1. When you stop reacting and start observing. There was a time when reacting felt like strength. Someone says something rude, you clap back harder. Someone misunderstands you, you rush to explain. Someone attacks you, fight back. And before you know it, reacting becomes a habit, a trap you don't even see yourself falling into. But at some point, quietly, without drama, something shifts. Not because you're tired, but because you start to see it clearly. Every time you react, you hand over the remote control of your life to someone else. There's an old Zen story. One morning, a monk was sweeping the temple courtyard when a hurried traveler accidentally bumped into him, knocking his broom to the ground. The man quickly apologized, flustered, but the monk simply smiled, bowed slightly, and said, "You didn't bump into me. My karma passed by, and I stood still to witness it." It wasn't politeness. It was understanding. When the mind is still, there's no need to separate right from wrong, attacker from victim. Everything is just a passing moment, nothing more. People often confuse not reacting with weakness. But actually, it's the deepest kind of strength. Reacting is easy. It's instinct. But to pause, to stay grounded even when emotions rise, that takes wisdom. Those who live in constant reaction don't see this. They believe that if they don't defend themselves, they'll be walked on. If they don't speak up, they won't be understood. If they don't protect the ego, who will? But when the mind truly settles, you realize, not every situation deserves your resistance. Not every conversation needs a winner. And sometimes, silence is the strongest answer of all. There was a woman who once shared that she lived for years with an angry temper. Every time her husband said something wrong, or her children disobeyed, she had to set things straight. Every dinner felt like a battlefield. She thought she was teaching them, but really, she was reacting out of a deep fear of not being heard, not being seen, not being valued. Then she began to meditate. Slowly, layer by layer, she started to recognize her emotions. And some days, When conflict arose, instead of arguing, she just took a deep breath and said nothing. Not because she had nothing to say, but because she no longer needed to say it. She began to see her husband not as an opponent, but as someone also struggling. And something shifted not just in her, but in the whole family. The Buddha once said, "When the mind is silent, wisdom naturally appears." When we stop letting our emotions pull the strings, we begin to see clearly that often people speak from fear, from wounds they haven't healed. And when we stop reacting, we stop wounding them further. We create space for both of us to heal. Now, this doesn't happen overnight. You don't become calm by flipping a switch. But every time you catch yourself about to explode, and you choose not to, that's a major step in breaking the karmic cycle. Because karma isn't just what happened in the past. It's how you continue responding to what happens now. And every time you pause, every time you breathe instead of react, you're untangling the knot a little more. Ask yourself, lately, do you still feel the need to explain everything? Do careless words still wound you? Do you still push back every time someone misunderstands you? If your answers are starting to be no, then you're walking the right path. Not reacting doesn't mean you don't care. It means you've realized that inner peace is more valuable than being right. And the moment you can keep your heart steady in the middle of the storm, that's when you'll know karma no longer has a grip on you. 2. When old painful patterns stop coming back. Have you ever noticed how certain types of people just keep showing up in your life? You leave one painful relationship, and not long after, someone new walks in different face, different name, but somehow it all feels painfully familiar. Same letdowns, same feeling of not being truly loved. Or maybe it's at work. You switch jobs, change environments, but the same dynamics follow you, feeling unseen, underappreciated, criticized. It's like life is replaying the same movie just with a new cast. And for years, most people don't even realize what's happening. They blame others, blame bad luck, think, maybe I just attract the wrong people. But if you pause and really look deeper, something powerful becomes clear. These people, these situations, they're not here to punish you, they're mirrors. The Buddha once said, karma is an unfinished lesson. When the heart is still holding on, when old wounds haven't been seen or healed, life will keep bringing similar experiences almost identical until the lesson is complete. Not to hurt you, but to wake you up. There was a young woman who once shared during a fall retreat. She said she couldn't understand why everyone she ever loved ended up leaving. No one stayed. From her first love to her most recent relationship, the pattern was always the same. Warm in the beginning, then distant, then silent, then gone. She used to blame them for being cold. Sometimes she even blamed herself for loving too much. But one evening, after a walking meditation in the forest, she sat quietly under a tree. No one around, no advice, just the sound of her breath and dry leaves in the wind. She lit a stick of incense, closed her eyes, and whispered a question to the dark. What in me keeps attracting this? That was the first moment she turned inward. Not to judge herself, not to carry guilt, but to take ownership of her story and gently ask, what in her had been saying yes to a kind of love that never stayed? What was it inside that kept drawing in people who were emotionally unavailable? Over time, she saw what she'd been afraid to see. The loneliness from childhood, the distant relationship with a mother who rarely offered warmth. And suddenly, she realized she hadn't really been loving others. She was trying to heal the little girl who felt abandoned long ago. And once she saw that, something softened. She stopped searching for someone to fill the gap. She no longer attracted people who mirrored her wounds. The next relationship didn't come right away. But when it did, it was different, not someone arriving to patch up her pain, but someone who could walk alongside her in peace. That is what karmic transformation looks like. Because when your inner frequency changes, the world around you changes. The saying goes, you don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. As long as we carry unresolved pain, karma acts like a magnet pulling the same patterns toward us. But once the lesson is learned, once you stop playing the victim, once you stop chasing people to fill a void, the story ends. From a Buddhist perspective, this isn't some mystical miracle. It's just the natural law of cause and effect. When you plant a different seed, the seed of awareness, of inner clarity, you grow a different result. No forcing, no chasing. It happens as naturally as breath, or a lotus blooming in its own season. The people who once triggered you stop showing up. The situations that once shook you quietly fall away. And you don't have to fix anything, you just have to stop being the old version of yourself. There's a powerful line in the Dhammapada. No one saves us but ourselves. We must walk the path alone. And that path doesn't mean running from the old patterns, it means turning toward them, looking them in the eye, learning what they came to teach. Once you truly learn it, you don't need to cut anything off. It falls away on its own. Just like how a healthy body no longer reacts to a virus it once feared, not because the virus disappeared, but because you've changed. And the beautiful part? You don't need to stay on guard, watching for whether the old story might creep back in. Because once your inner vibration has shifted, those same people, those same situations, they simply can't find you anymore. The door has quietly closed, not with anger, but with understanding. Take a look at your life over the past few months. Are there people you were once entangled with who are no longer in your orbit? Are there old patterns that just don't seem to show up anymore? Are there feelings that once haunted you that now don't even rise? It's not because you've grown colder. It's because you're no longer fertile ground for those old seeds of suffering. That's a powerful sign. When karma no longer shows up in the people you meet. When life stops handing you the same lesson on repeat. When you stop playing a role in the old drama and start writing a new story, one that's wiser, kinder, and finally free. 3. When you no longer compare yourself to others. There's a quiet kind of exhaustion that many people carry every single day. The feeling of not being enough, not smart enough, not fast enough, not successful enough. And more often than not, that feeling doesn't come from within. It comes from constantly looking outside. In today's world, comparison has become second nature. All it takes is a few seconds scrolling your phone, and you're bombarded with hundreds of lives that seem better than yours. Someone just bought a house. Someone's on vacation in Greece. Someone got promoted. And then, when you come back to your own life, this quiet emptiness creeps in. Why are they so far ahead and I'm still here? But then something shifts. Not because the world gets quieter, but because something inside finally stops shaking. A middle-aged woman once shared during a Dharma talk. For years, she always compared herself to her younger sister. Her sister had a happy marriage, a stable income, and kids who were thriving in school. She, on the other hand, had gone through a divorce, worked freelance, and her teenage son had dropped out of high school. Every family gathering felt like a spotlight on everything she lacked. She didn't hate her sister, not at all. But each time she looked at her, her chest would tighten. Only after years of meditation and gently coming back to herself. One afternoon, while brewing tea, something softened. Her mind quieted, and a simple thought arose. Why do I have to be anyone else but me? It wasn't some loud epiphany. It landed softly like a speck of sunlight falling into a steaming teacup, and from that day on, she no longer felt less than. She still didn't have her dream house. Her son was still finding his way, but she knew now everyone has their own timeline. And her path was also blooming, just not like anyone else's. The Buddha once said, "No one can walk the path for you. You must walk it yourself." When we truly understand this, something inside begins to let go. We stop looking around to define ourselves. We stop measuring who's ahead or who's behind. And in that letting go, something beautiful shows up. Gratitude for our own unique journey. Because comparison doesn't just exhaust us, it blinds us. We forget what we've already overcome. We forget how far we've come. We only focus on someone else's highlight reel, never knowing they're quietly wrestling with their own sleepless nights, their own invisible fears. As one wise meditator once said, we often compare ourselves to people's masks and feel sad that we don't look like their makeup. That hits home, doesn't it? But once you start honoring the rhythm of your own life, every step you take, no matter how slow, becomes meaningful. You stop asking, "Why am I not there yet?" And instead, there's a soft smile. Everything's arriving right on time. It's a deep kind of freedom. Freedom from pressure. Freedom from the scoreboard. Freedom from that voice in your head whispering, "Come on, they've already made it. What about you?" A man once lost everything after a business collapse. For 3 years, he didn't show up at weddings, didn't post anything online. He stayed home, took care of his aging mother, and read in silence. Everyone assumed he had fallen to the bottom, but during those quiet years, he learned how to live without needing to win. He woke up early to cook, watered the garden, wrote quietly in his journal. And one day in those pages, he wrote something he'd never said aloud. "I don't need to beat anyone anymore. I just want to understand myself." 3 years later, he started a new business, not to prove anything, but because peace had taken root in his heart. And that peace became the reason he succeeded. No more racing. No need to shine. No desire to outdo anyone. Just being honest with your own path and humble enough to realize every soul has its season. No one is late. No one is early. And when comparison fades, happiness quietly arrives. Not loud, not flashy, but gentle like a single leaf falling into your open palm. Enough to make you pause. Enough to make you smile. For when you feel strangely protected, there are quiet moments in life. Moments that don't feel dramatic at all. But when you look back, they stop you in your tracks. Moments when something could have gone terribly wrong, but didn't. When you were heading in the wrong direction, but something gently pulled you back. No booming voice from the sky, no shining light. Just a gust of wind, a delayed step, or an unexpected phone call. And then, somewhere deep inside, a question begins to stir. Is someone quietly protecting me? A man once shared a story. One fall afternoon, he was rushing to catch a bus. Just as he was about to run across the street, his shoelace came undone. He knelt to tie it. A few seconds later, a truck sped past right where he would have stepped. He just stood there, frozen, his hand still on the shoelace. No one could explain it. But deep inside, he knew something had just saved him. Not because he was lucky, but because he had stopped creating new karmic entanglements, and the weight of old karma had started to lift. In Buddhism, there's a beautiful teaching. When karma is heavy, it's like wearing a thick, wet coat. Every step feels tangled, and life keeps pulling you into chaos. But when the mind softens, when karmic residue fades, not because anyone blessed you, but because you have changed, then even trouble loses its grip. Accidents don't land the same way. People who used to drag you into drama simply drift out of your life. One retreat attendee once said, "Back then, every time I had something important to do, something would always go wrong. The power would go out. My car would break down. Someone would pick a fight. But lately, things just flow. I don't feel like I have to fight anymore." And it's true, when the mind is calm, the world begins to flow differently too. It's not magic. It's not some cosmic guardian clearing your path. It's the natural unfolding of karma. A mind no longer clinging, no longer grasping, no longer reacting, starts radiating a very different kind of energy. That energy is like light. It doesn't defend you aggressively, but darkness simply can't stay near it. There's a line from the Sutra of 42 Chapters where the Buddha says, "When one lives with virtue, even if the fruits aren't visible yet, they are like a shadow that never leaves you. They will surely come." So when someone lives with awareness, avoiding new karmic knots, keeping their heart steady and unattached, then good things don't have to be chased. They arrive. And that strange protection they feel? It's the natural result of mindful living. Now, someone might ask, what about when bad things do happen? Does that mean the person wasn't practicing well enough? Not exactly. Some old karma still needs to unfold. But the difference is, when someone no longer resists life, no longer blames or clings, even in tough times, they still feel held. Not by something outside, but by their own grounded heart. Protection doesn't always mean bad things don't happen. Sometimes it means you walk through them without falling apart. There's a story from a Zen teacher. As a young monk, he once walked through a forest on his way to the temple. Suddenly, a poisonous snake appeared right in front of him. His first instinct was panic, but he stood still, took a deep breath, and looked at the snake. The snake looked back, then slithered away. Later, someone told him, "You were lucky the snake didn't strike." But the teacher smiled. He knew it wasn't luck. It was the peace inside him that changed what happened outside him. And that peace doesn't appear out of nowhere. It comes from practice, from purifying the heart. So it no longer sends out signals of fear, anger, or need. When there's nothing left to cling to, you don't need fences to protect you. Your own clarity becomes your shield. Look back at your own life these past few months. Have certain things that used to scare you just stopped happening? Have opportunities shown up naturally without you chasing them? Have certain people, once a source of pain, quietly left your life without any big goodbye? If so, you may be entering a very sacred space within yourself, where old karma is dissolving and the light within you is starting to protect you. You don't need to hide from the world. You don't need to live in fear. Just keep your mind clear, your heart gentle, and your steps mindful, because when light is present, darkness simply has nowhere to go. 5. When silence becomes your closest friend. There's a stage in life when the thing people fear most is silence. Silence on a weekend morning when no one texts. Silence at night when the phone doesn't ring. Silence in a quiet room where the sound of a fan, the creak of the walls, and the echo of your own thoughts suddenly feel too loud. Back then, silence felt like a mirror that was too honest. It reflected back all the emptiness we tried to fill with background television noise, endless scrolling, or quick conversations just to not feel alone. But then, something begins to shift. Through practice, through slowing down, little by little, silence stops being the enemy and becomes something else entirely. A friend, a familiar space, a place where your heart can breathe without having to perform, without having to prove anything, without trying to be understood. A young woman once came to a retreat at a temple in Northern California. She was outgoing, always in the middle of conversations, surrounded by friends and laughter. But she admitted she had never eaten a single meal in silence, never sat alone for 10 minutes without reaching for her phone. Then, during her first silent retreat, 3 whole days without talking, without music, without a screen, she started to feel restless. Not because anyone hurt her, but because for the first time, there was nowhere left to hide, no one to impress, just her. And that version of herself, she hadn't seen her in a long, long time. On the 3rd day, while sitting under an old pine tree in the temple courtyard, she had a quiet realization. Silence didn't hate her. Silence just wanted her to come home. From that moment on, silence was no longer punishment. It became a place she could return to. She learned to sit alone and not feel sad. She no longer needed to post something online just to prove she was alive. She didn't need anyone to ask, "Are you okay today?" She simply breathed and let herself be. In Buddhist teaching, there's a profound insight. The mind is originally still like a calm lake. The waves only arise from our own restless thoughts. So when we fear silence, it's often because our inner world is still unsettled. There are voices inside we haven't listened to yet. But when we finally sit with ourselves, not to fix, not to analyze, but just to be there, those inner noises begin to soften. And that's when we start to experience a different kind of peace. Not one that's given to us by others, but one that blooms naturally from within. The truth is, many of us spend a lot of energy running from silence. We stay busy, not because we need to work, but because we're afraid to stop. We chase relationships, not because we're ready to love, but because we're afraid to be alone with ourselves. But once someone finds the courage to enter silence, what they discover isn't loneliness. It's a homecoming, a return to the little child inside that once got lost, a return to unspoken feelings, a return to the breath, steady, faithful, unnoticed for so long. From the perspective of someone who's walked the path of practice for years, one of the clearest signs of real inner transformation is when you no longer fear being alone, not because you don't need people, but because you've realized if you can't be at peace with yourself, you won't truly be present with anyone else either. A person who has learned to rest in silence no longer demands to be filled up by others, and because of that, they become a refuge for those around them. Not through words, but through presence, their stillness becomes a sanctuary. There's a saying from a Zen master, sometimes the deepest healing doesn't come from advice, but from someone who knows how to sit with you in silence. If silence has ever felt empty to you, maybe you just hadn't gone deep enough yet, because in the very heart of silence, there isn't coldness. There's a garden coming back to life. In that space, old wounds are warmed, forgotten dreams are welcomed home, and the soul begins to blossom quietly, with no applause, and no need to prove anything. Ask yourself this: when there's no sound around you, do you feel anxious, When no one messages you all day, do you feel like you're worth less? If your answer is no, if you still feel whole, then maybe, just maybe, your silence is the clearest sign that your heart is finally healing. 6. When others begin to reflect your inner peace. Some people walk into a room, and without saying a word, the whole energy changes. Conversations soften, tension melts away. Even angry people stop raising their voices. Children stop running. There's just a calmness. It's not power. It's not because they're famous or in charge. It's simply the quiet presence they bring. A peace that can't be seen, but you feel it. A stillness that makes people feel safe. And that's when you realize there's a kind of influence that doesn't come from words. It comes from presence, from the energy someone carries within. There's a silent way to heal others. Not by teaching, not by fixing, but simply by being there with a mind as calm as still water. A gardener behind a Zen monastery in Oregon was once asked, "Why are you always so quiet? Don't you get tired working all day in the sun with no one even noticing you?" He smiled and gently replied, "When you no longer need people to notice you, you start to feel like everything is smiling back at you." Not everyone will understand that, but those who have practiced, who've spent time in meditation, they'll know. When your mind is still, the world starts to respond differently. The Buddha once said, "The mind leads all things. The mind is the forerunner. The mind creates." In other words, the way the world treats us often comes from the energy we're sending out. A judgmental mind often draws more judgment. A defensive heart often finds conflict. But a mind that's compassionate, gentle, and present starts to invite those same qualities from others. Not because we told them to change, but because our energy changes what they feel. One woman shared how she used to argue constantly with her teenage daughter. Every day felt like a battle about clothes, curfews, phone time. But after she started meditating every morning, just 15 minutes, something shifted. The same situations happened, the same daughter, but she no longer reacted. She listened instead of yelling. And strangely enough, her daughter stopped yelling too. She said, "I didn't change my daughter. I changed the way I showed up in our conversations." And that changed everything. Transformation doesn't come from pressure. It comes from energy, the energy of being. Like a bowl of water sitting near a flame. The flame doesn't have to touch it, but the water still warms. And people are the same. When they're near someone who is truly present, not judging, not rushing, not controlling, they begin to breathe easier. They feel seen. And when people feel seen, they start to heal. From the eyes of a long-time practitioner, it's clear. Inner peace isn't something we just keep for ourselves. It spreads. Like the fragrance of a flower, it doesn't need to be advertised. It simply fills the space. There's a profound teaching in Buddhism. The Dharma doesn't just live in words. It lives in the life of one who practices. And people feel that. Even if you never teach. Even if you never quote scripture. If you live with mindfulness, with compassion, with a peaceful heart, then your footsteps, your presence, become a teaching all their own. So pause and reflect. Have you noticed you're less drawn into arguments lately? Have people who used to be angry around you become more gentle? Do you feel respected even without having to prove yourself? If so, you may be stepping into a beautiful place. Your mind has become a mirror of peace, and the world is reflecting that peace back to you. You don't need to speak louder. You don't need to fix or change anyone. Just keep your heart clear. Like a candle in a dark room. It doesn't argue with the darkness. It simply shines. 7. When you stop chasing and things start coming to you, there's a deep paradox in the spiritual path, one that takes many of us years to truly feel. The more you chase something, the further it seems to run. But when you finally let go, the good things quietly start showing up. Not because the universe suddenly got kinder, not because you became lucky, but because your heart changed. And when the heart shifts, the way life flows around you shifts too. A man once shared during a Dharma talk in New York. He said that in his younger years, he always felt something was missing. He didn't lack money. He didn't lack work, but he lacked that feeling of wholeness. He used to think, if I get that second house, maybe I'll feel more secure. Or, if that person truly loves me, then I'll finally be happy. So he ran, worked harder, tried to prove himself, both outside and inside. But every time he got what he wanted, that emptiness came back like a hunger that couldn't be filled. Then one year, everything collapsed. His business fell apart. He lost someone he loved. His savings vanished. He moved into a small home near the forest. No titles to hold on to. No one to impress. Mornings, he'd drink tea and watch the sunlight through the trees. Afternoons, he'd read old books and listened to the wind. No applause. No spotlight. But for the first time in his life, he felt enough. Not because he had anything, but because he finally didn't need anything. And that's when something magical began to happen. An old friend called out of the blue, inviting him to co-write a book. A neighbor dropped off food without expecting anything back. Nothing dramatic, just small, gentle moments. Right on time. Effortless. He said softly, "It feels like once I stopped gripping life so tightly, it finally brought me where I needed to go." In Buddhism, this isn't a miracle. It's simply the law of karma and the nature of mind. When we cling too tightly, our energy says, "I don't have enough. I'm afraid. I need this to be okay." And the universe reflects that back. But when the heart settles, when we act without expectation, good things start to flow. Not because we demand them, but because we're no longer pushing them away. The Buddha said, "There is no joy without letting go." True happiness isn't found in constantly getting what we want. It's found in the freedom from needing anything to feel worthy. Some people might ask, so should I stop dreaming? Stop setting goals? No, not at all. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means you still plant the seeds. But you don't panic if the harvest takes time. You do your part. With love, with sincerity, but you're not obsessed with the outcome. You give, and if it comes back, great. If not, your peace remains untouched. One young meditator once shared her story. She'd been trying for years to get into a top school. Every time she applied, she worked day and night, clinched with anxiety. And every year, she was rejected. Then on the third year, she applied with a different mindset. If I get in, wonderful. If not, maybe it's not the right time. And that year, she got in. But more importantly, she no longer needed it to feel good enough. Her peace came before the result. And that was the real gift. There's a lovely image in Zen. Be like the river, not the bucket. The bucket tries to grab and hold. It overflows. It runs out. But the river just flows. It doesn't cling. It doesn't resist. And because it doesn't cling, it receives more than any container could. The person who no longer chases life from a place of lack starts to live like that river. They don't demand that life look a certain way. They don't measure their worth by achievements. And oddly enough, that's exactly when life begins to give. Not because they're more deserving, but because they stopped pushing away their blessings by holding on so tightly. So take a moment. Reflect on the past few months. Have any unexpected blessings come your way? Not from effort, but from stillness? Did a new door open the moment you released something that was weighing you down? If so, you may be entering a beautiful space. A space where you don't need to chase anymore. A space where things come not to validate you, but simply because you're finally open to receive. 8. When you're grateful for the pain that once broke you, there comes a day when you look back on all those years. The losses, the broken dreams, the people who walked away, and somehow, instead of bitterness, a quiet smile rises from your heart. Not because the pain is forgotten, but because you finally understand. You understand that it was those very wounds that led you back to yourself. There was a man who once lost his young daughter in a tragic accident. For a whole year, he didn't smile, didn't want to go anywhere. Every morning felt like a battle with memories. People tried to comfort him. He stayed silent. They invited him to meditate. He refused. Until one day, he walked into a meditation center, not looking for answers, just because he had nothing left to lose. He sat in the meditation hall, watching a young monk care for a dying orchid. Every day, the monk would water it, tend the soil, gently remove dead leaves. Someone passing by asked, "Why are you still caring for that? It's already dying." And the monk smiled. "It's not for the flower to survive. It's so I don't lose my own tenderness." The old man heard that, and he wept. From that day forward, he began to water himself too. Not to erase the grief of losing his child, but so that grief wouldn't kill the part of his heart that still knew how to love. Little by little, he stopped running from pain. He invited it to sit beside him, like an old companion. No more fear, no more pushing it away. He began to see what was hidden inside the loss. How deeply he had loved his daughter, how fleeting and fragile life truly was, and how that moment of falling apart opened a door to a spiritual life he never imagined before. In Buddhism, we call that the turning point when suffering becomes the path. The Buddha once said, "It is through suffering that awakening begins." And no, this awakening isn't free. It costs you tears, loneliness, the kind of pain that knocks you to your knees. But once you've walked through it, you're not the same person anymore. You move forward not as someone who won, but as someone who knows every wound is also a doorway. There are things in life no teacher can give you, only pain can. A betrayal might teach you compassion. A loss might teach you to let go. A death might teach you to cherish life. And when the heart becomes still, you can look back on those moments without flinching. No more what-ifs, just a quiet bow and a whisper in your soul. Thank you. Not because it was easy, but because it made you softer, wiser, more human. A woman once shared her journey through a chronic illness. For 10 years, she felt like a burden to her family. There were days she secretly wished she wouldn't wake up. But through a deep connection with the Dharma, she learned to meditate, to observe her body and mind without judgment. And day by day, she realized her illness wasn't the enemy. It was a strict but powerful teacher. It taught her to slow down, to be grateful just to breathe in the morning, to stop chasing outside and begin coming home inside. She said, "Before, I just wanted to be cured. Now I realize I've already been healed. Not in my body, but in my heart." That kind of transformation isn't flashy, but it's real. And only those who've truly sat with their pain can understand it. From a spiritual perspective, we can say, a heart that's grateful for its suffering has moved through deep karma, no longer fighting life, no longer blaming others, not even blaming yourself, just stillness, like a river watching everything that has passed and seeing it all happened exactly as it needed to. So ask yourself, is there a pain in your heart that hasn't yet been named? A memory that still tightens your chest when it comes back? If so, don't rush to forget it. Sit with it, gently, and ask yourself just one question. If that had never happened, would I still have this much depth to understand others today? If the answer is no, maybe it's time to stop resenting the pain. Maybe it's no longer just a scar, but a sacred reminder. You fell, but you rose with more compassion than before. When someone no longer fears silence, no longer reacts to every emotion, no longer clings to old hurts, when they stop comparing, stop chasing suffering, and can finally look at past pain with gratitude, that's not just a psychological shift. That's karma being purified. No more invisible strings pulling them back. No more old wounds repeating in new disguises. Just a lighter soul, a deeper heart, a calmer way of being. But this transformation, if not nurtured, can fade. That's why, once karma is cleared, we don't stop. We protect our peace like a small flame. Not flashy, but warm enough to heal ourselves and those who quietly pass through our lives. So, keep living with mindfulness. Observe more, react less, sit in stillness. Be grateful not just for what's beautiful, but for what once broke you and helped you grow. You don't need to rush. You don't need to prove anything. Just live from the light inside. And when you do, you're no longer walking under the weight of karma. You're walking free in the middle of the world. If today's sharing touched something in you, please subscribe to Buddhism Seeds so we can keep walking this path together. Don't forget to like, share with someone who may need it, and leave a comment below. What part of your healing journey are you most grateful for? May you always have the stillness to listen and the wisdom to see the light, even on the cloudiest of days.